Okay, we'll call the regular meeting of the Jersey Shore Area School Directors Order for April 26, 2021. Can we have a roll call, please?
Roll call.
Sorry, I forgot my role tonight. Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Brungard.
Here.
Mrs. Dobler.
Here.
Mrs. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Kinley.
Here.
Mrs. Petrosky.
Here.
Mrs. Stemler.
Here.
Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Allen.
Here.
And I didn't see yet, is Robert on here?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm here, yes.
thank you. 9 members present.
Okay. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Just mute your mics.
In our Clinton County area, officials report 233 newly confirmed COVID cases, and again, 0 COVID-related deaths.
Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. We have the minutes from March 8th and March 22nd, regular meetings to approve. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved, Mary.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Second?
I'll second. Go ahead,
Was
Mr. Kinley.
that Angela?
Whoever.
We're going to give it to you.
Thank you.
Any discussion or questions on the minutes? Hearing none, can we do a roll call, please?
All right, Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler.
Yes.
Mrs. Grant.
Yes.
Mr. Kinley.
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky.
Here. Yes. Sorry.
We already did that one.
You're here.
Mrs. Stemler.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Allen.
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, Treasurer's Report. We have the March 2021 Treasurer's Report and March 2021 Investment Report. Can we have a motion in a second, please?
So moved, Mary.
Second, Harry.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler.
Yes.
Mrs. Grant.
Yes.
Mr. Kinley.
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky.
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Allen.
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, approval of bills totaling $4,696,479.94. Could we have a motion, please?
So moved, Mary.
Second, Wayne.
Any questions, comments?
They are slightly higher than a typical months. Our quarterly PSERS payment came out and our second bond payments came out in March. So that's the reason for the increase.
Thank you, Mr. Enders. Anything else? Hearing none, could we have a roll call?
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler.
Yes.
Mrs. Grant.
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
Moving on to communications. Do we have any communications, Dr. Elmer?
I have none for this evening.
President's report. First thing I'd like to announce, we had an executive session prior to tonight's meeting for legal and personnel purposes. The second thing I'd like to announce, I'd like to recognize one of our wrestlers on the high school team who went to Wisconsin this past weekend and competed in the U15 national tournament. And he finished as the runner-up. That was Brock Weiss. And in the top 8, there were wrestlers from literally all over the country. California, Illinois, Nebraska, Colorado, Washington State. So that's quite an accomplishment by Brock, who was representing the M2 Training Center that's coached by David Taylor. So thank you and congratulations to Brock. The other thing I'd like, just a brief announcement. You're probably all aware that I was on that cyber reform task force, and the draft report has been distributed to all the members. It's about, I think it's 28 pages. And as soon as that's finally approved, pending release by PSBA, we'll get it out to everyone in the board. We were one of 17 school districts across the state that were invited to participate in the task force. One of the things that made this task force necessary is because the original charter law, for those that are new, was written in 1997 and was only changed once since then. And the only change was when they went from having the brick and mortar charter schools like Sugar Valley and moving to the cyber online charter schools. That was the only change. But the student enrollment from 1997 was 982 students statewide, as opposed to currently it's 169,253 students statewide. So you can see how that's grown across the state. And the task force came up with 8 specific policy recommendations that'll help provide some relief, hopefully, for local taxpayers that are their monies are being kind of migrated out away from us to fund the cybers. So I'll keep you posted on any future changes. And that's all I had. Intermediate report.
Yes, I would like to report, the IU had an adaptive bike and stroller giveaway on April 20th, and this is available at no cost to all eligible students with disabilities from our 4-county region. And Dr. Ulmer was actually able to attend when one of our students from Avis Elementary was gifted with an adaptive bike. And I would like to share the video that WNEP had on TV, so everybody can see that.
It's coming from our tech department right now.
Good.
Great.
County. This is awesome.
It was a special day for many children and their families in Williamsport. As Newswatch 16's Chris Keating shows us, the kids received brand new adaptive bicycles.
Meet Arabella DeClerc. She is one of 17 children that received a brand new adaptive bike or stroller in Lycoming County.
This is awesome. This is the best day of my life right now. Absolutely. Thank you, God, the best day of my life.
The organization Variety provides modified bikes and strollers to kids with special needs. 5-year-old Arabella suffers from Charcot-Marie tooth. It affects the nerves and muscles in her arms and legs.
This is going to raise her spirits so high. This little girl is going to feel like she is part of everybody else when we want to go for bike rides and she's got to ride in the buggy. Now she can ride her bike.
All the adaptive bikes and strollers that Variety hands out to children have been customized to the liking of the child, and that includes the color. Zayden and his dad Zachary Dieter took their brand new blue bike out for a stroll.
Oh, it's a great feeling. Great, because he just enjoys it. He just wants to keep going, so.
Families tell Newswatch 16 that it's great to see their children doing an activity they couldn't do before.
In the past, some tricycles that physically he could ride on, but as far as putting forth the effort to it, he was kind of immobilized. So to see him be able to pedal this assisted, and he absolutely loves it.
We've tried so much for trikes and Amish-built trikes and stuff that we thought that maybe she would be able to ride, and she struggled so much. This little girl deserves this.
Families that are in need of an adaptive bike or stroller can apply for one through the organization's website. A link to Variety's webpage can be found on our site, WNEP.com. Chris Keating, Newswatch 16, Williamsport.
Those are my report.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank
Petro.
you. It's a very uplifting report from the IU, so I appreciate it. It's nice when you have good news like that.
Yeah.
Student representative report.
Good evening, everyone. Just a brief report this evening. A while ago, I was trying to congratulate the students of the month of the high school. I kind of got wrapped up in some other things, and I'd like to start that again this evening. So for April, I'd like to congratulate Maya K. Bartman and Hannah Steppe as the students of the month at the high school. We're always proud of the work that they do, and all the students who have been students of the month so far have represented the high school very well. I'd also like to congratulate the FBLA. April 13th, we found out our how we placed at the state competition, and there was 8 national qualifiers, and a big congratulations to everyone who participated. With everything going on right now, sometimes it can be hard to find the motivation to do those virtual competitions and whatnot, and kudos to everyone who did that. And finally, on Wednesday of this week is going to be the Honor Society inductions for several of the honor societies at the high school. And from what I'm reading, it looks like that there's going to be a recording of this event, that it's going to be available to parents since parents can't attend the event in person. This is going to be during the lunch block at the high school. Other than that, that ends my report for this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Robert. Okay, move on to superintendent's report.
I'm gonna switch my order and start with Mr. Enders and his formal budget presentation, and we'll go from there. Mr. Enders.
Thank you, Dr. Ullman. The attachments I'm going to speak of are on the attached to the agenda. I will share my screen so that you can see them as well. Well, I don't think I did that right. You can't.
Yep, yes, sir.
You guys, are you seeing the online screen? You are? Okay.
We were.
We were, now not.
Now, are you?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
It's not indicating the right way on my computer, but that's fine. So we, starting at the top and working our way down, I have updated this year's revenue and expenditure and usage of the fund balance based on projected revenue, which we had talked about the last meeting, and the updated projected expenditures, which is also on there. And at the very back of your packet was a detailed listing by major object, major function, major object of the projected balances for this fiscal year by each budget area. And I'm not going to go through that listing in detail either. Just a couple of things to highlight. We talked about our cyber school costs increasing this year, and the budget is reflective of that. But I do want to let you know that we are projecting over $1 million in costs for tuition for JSASD, which is part of the driver of this negative deficit. The one other thing concerning the projected deficit for this year, this does take into consideration the teacher's contract for 2021, but the dollar amount for retro is not in this dollar amount. That will have to come out of your fund balance that you had in the last budget cycle, the end of the audit. But it will be reflective at the end of the year and year-end audit in a larger deficit. Does that make sense to everyone? Moving down, the budget deficit for 21-22 right now sits at just over $900,000. And I will go into and talk about, this is our standard document that reconciles the budget from one year to the next. So this is reconciling it from the last meeting of March to this meeting. I'm not going to go down through this budget, and the major decrease in the deficit was from the new contract, which is the top 4 line items, with the contingency going out and the new contract going in for salaries and benefits. Outside of that, the other major change was the refinancing that the district just done. That is reflective in the budget now as well. So that would be these 2 top line items here. Other than that, there's just a lot of changes from us reviewing the budget, district-wide budget, and other areas of the budget, or the major changes from the last budget to this last budget presentation to this budget presentation. Are there any questions in the changes and or the current budget as it sits today, or the projections?
So as far as the expenditures for 2021, you're projecting like $300 and some thousand over budget.
Correct. About $400,000 over budget. But like I said, I know what the year, this is a projection, so it's an estimate, but I do know the year-end number will be higher than this number because of having to pay out retro. But that dollar amount has to come out of your fund balance.
Yeah.
And the major driver of that is our increase in both our JSASD cost and our charter school cost.
So when you say the fund balance, is that like, because wasn't there money like in the contingency fund for that or not?
The money that was in the contingency was there to pay the increase in the 2021 wages.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will move. Can you all see the formal budget presentation?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So this is our standard document that we use basically every year I've been here. Is one that I inherited. This is just the documentation that I just showed you, just on a slide. So I'm going to breeze through these two slides quick. This is our revenue and expenditure historical graphical information. Revenue is in the darker yellow, and expenditures are in the lighter yellow. Both 2021 and 21-22 are both the budgeted amounts. And this is.
I have a question on the revenue. Last month or last meeting, I think we talked about the the seemingly high projected actual for earned income tax revenue.
Yep.
Do we know any more about why that? I mean, it seems like it's really an outlier compared to the last number of years. Have we determined any more about why that is going to come in at that amount, and moving forward, is that sustainable or?
So, as I presented last meeting, we did pull the top 10 employers for our district, and number one is UPMC, and Geisinger is in the top 10. So I believe the unusual increase we're seeing right now is due to wages that healthcare employees are earning that work in our district this fiscal year.
So like overtime and that because of COVID then?
Correct.
Okay.
This is a graphical representation of our fund balance. If you notice this low mark, this was our low point. This is when back in 04, 05, I think the fund balance went down to about $5,000.
Yep.
Revenue by sources, there isn't much of a change from our typical percentages. We get about 55% of our revenue from the state, 43% from local funds, and about 2% is from federal sources. This other sources would be the $5,000 we budget every year in the sale of surplus items. There again, do remember that our budget as it sits today still does not reflect any increases in subsidies from the Commonwealth. Here is real estate tax increases. 2021 and prior is actually what happened. So if you remember last year, we went through the rebalance rates in Clinton County, or like Cumming County. I apologize. It was the one that got the slight uptick of 0.13, and Clinton County did not have an increase at all. Like Cumming County was the rebalanced one. This year's index is 4.1. This is a dollar amount of troops. If I picked to put Clinton County is the one that's being rebalanced this year. So if you went to Clinton County rebalance rates, like Cumming County actually gets a decrease, and Clinton County gets a slight increase. So this would be the assessed value of the home. This would be the impact on their tax bill.
Is it, Mr. Enders, is that negative numbers and positive numbers there, are they percentages or what are they actually?
Dollar amount.
$11.
Yep. So if the assessed value was $250,000, they would have a decrease of $11 on their tax bill.
Wow.
They just said state revenue changes really don't reflect any change. There's a decrease in our state revenue. It's not really a decrease. This is the CARES money that the state gave us last year. So we did not obviously budget for that this year. And that's the primary reason for the decrease in state revenue. This decrease in retirement is due to the budget now reflecting the actual contract. Analysis by object. So this is the object codes, 100s, 200s, 300s, 400s, etc., and the percentage they make up of the total budget. One of the primary things you usually look at here is how much our salaries and benefits are costing the district. We're at 69%, which is probably about average of where most districts are. Usually most of them around 70% of the budget is salaries and benefits. This is analysis by function, which the functions are 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and so on. The thousands are instruction, so those are direct in the classroom student costs. So those are about 60%. This is past and future debt service payments you're going to have to make. This is reflective of the refinancing. So as Jamie Doyle said, you were scheduled and are still scheduled to pay off the debt by 2030. And as you can see, this is, for the most part, pretty flat, consistent payments. Just a graphical representation of our outstanding debt. Jamie told you your debt limit. I did calculate this slide and put it in here. You have a debt limit right now of about $68.5 million that you could borrow. This is our historical subsidy that we received from the state for our debt. Next year, we are budgeted to get $622,000. Do know that 16, 17, and 18, 19, there were one-time funds of money received on the JSASD project. That's the reason for these anomalies sitting in here. This is the historical PSERS graph. 34.94 is next year's certified contribution rate. And they did not update their projected rates. When they released them, they said they released them in June. So I'm with everything in the news with PSERS. I'll be interested to see if we actually get those in June. But the old future rate that they had given us was 36.6%. I will tell you that they're projected for 21-22 last year, I think, was 34.95, so it came in really close. Charter schools. As you can see, we are projecting this year to be just shy of $3.3 million. And we have budgeted for next year $3.3 million. The subsidy that you see in this column, the state stopped giving the district subsidies the last year. Funding giving subsidies for charter school expenditures was in 10-11.
Would our budget suggest that we don't anticipate bringing back some of the students that moved to cyber this year or charter, especially cyber, I guess, which was a big increase, of course. I mean, is that the assumption?
I think it's a good conversation we as a board should have if we would like to decrease the budget for charter schools with our new position, or leave the budget alone and know that potentially that could be a savings we would have next year. I talked to you about JSOL and the increase in JSOL. I did not increase right now the budget for JSOL students for next year. Dr. Ulmer and I do need to sit down and talk about that. But I would be comfortable going either way with the budget as far as the charter school expenditures. If we wanted to leave it at 3.3, knowing that this would potentially could be a savings for us, or reducing it by a dollar amount that we all were comfortable with, and having the risk that we would come in over budget in that line item. But I think that's something that we would need to have together as a group, come up with that dollar amount and where we all were comfortable with it.
Yes, thanks.
Here again, this is just a graphical representation of the charter school cost. And the last slide here is enrollment. Now this enrollment was as of 4/8. We are looking at being less than 2,000 students next year. Be 869 in the elementary, 461 at the middle school, and 649. Some of this is a move to JSOL and charters, and some of it's just our enrollment for kindergarten this year is pretty down. Now, whether or not it stays like that, we don't know. But you'll also, the food service budget that you're going to hear soon is reflecting this decrease in enrollment too.
Mr. Anderson, this does not include any charter school, cyber school students or JSOL students, or does it include the JSOL?
This number right here does not include charters or JSOLs.
So this is in building enrollment.
Yep, and seats.
And there's about, what, 200 students out there that charter JSOL?
Dr. Ulmer, do you have that number?
The JSOL number?
I think it was around 200 for each.
I know it's on her enrollment list.
I'm pulling it up so I have the most recent one.
I can tell you it's 4/8 is her most recent one.
Give me a minute, I'm pulling it up. The 4/8 report, JSOL was 186. You're looking for outside, you want outside cybers as well? Outside cyber is 136 as of 4/8.
Sugar Valley usually is about.
Sugar Valley is 88 as of 4/8.
There's about 200 kids in charter schools.
Yeah.
That is the last slide for my presentation. Are there any questions concerning this?
I just have one, I guess. You're looking at a total deficit right now of 911,000,
That is correct.
and then you're projecting that to go up to about how much? About a couple 100,000 more?
Oh, up?
I thought you said there was some retirement or something was in there that wasn't included that you did project into this?
No, I think you're referencing this change right here with our state revenue changes. Our retirement subsidy went down because the budget now reflects the current contract.
In other words, this 911 it's not going to increase?
Well, I can tell you the major areas need to be done yet are the IU contract, which I did get a preliminary late last week on that. I don't have, it might go up slightly, like $1,000 or $2,000. I don't expect major changes there. And our insurances, which is always the last thing to go into the budget at the 11th hour.
Okay.
The only other would be is whether or not we change our budget amounts for JSAL and our budget amounts for charter schools.
Okay.
And we still don't have the state revenue number, correct, Ben?
We do not have any, no state revenue in this budget.
Is there any scuttlebutt on what that's going to look like?
I've heard nothing.
Okay.
Well, the scuttlebutt I'm hearing is I've heard flatline.
Which is the dollar amount on flatline?
We are currently budgeted at flatline, so if it's flatline, it's not going to negatively impact us.
That's already in the budget for that, I thought, right?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't go down, we're safe.
Okay, so in other words, the last presentation you made, our deficit was approximately 2 million.
Yep.
Now it's down to a little less than 1 million.
Correct.
And it doesn't look like it's gonna go any lower. I think what amazes me is, kind of disturbs me a little bit. Here it is, it's gonna be the 1st of May. We've been looking at a $2 million deficit all this time. We knew this contract was gonna lower it a little bit. Maybe some of us thought it was gonna lower it quite a bit more. But we're still looking at almost 1 million, and we have not, as of yet, that I'm aware of, discussed any means of cutting this deficit. I don't believe we discussed anything as we have in previous years. I hope the heck we don't. I know where it's going to go. It's going to be a burden on the taxpayers again. We can't keep pushing this to the taxpayers year after year. I mean, especially when to me, we haven't discussed cutting this deficit whatsoever. I certainly hope. We only have 2 months. I don't know where anybody's minds are that if they have plans or something's going to come up miraculously here in the next month that we're going to see a great big cut in this budget somehow. I don't see it coming. I don't know whether you plan on taking down the fund balance to alleviate this, but man, with these times and stuff, I just can't see putting this on the taxpayers, but it looks like that's where it's going to go again, unless we come up with some tax cuts somewhere or some deficit cuts somehow. I certainly hope that we would maybe try and discuss it at a future meeting. Might be too late. I don't know. Maybe it's not, but I'm just a little concerned.
And unfortunately, this is a continuation of the state cutting education funding at the state level, and then local taxpayers having to pick up the difference. Because if they flatline, we have to make it up somewhere.
And next year is not going to be any different. Next year is probably going to be worse. And if we don't do something this year, maybe at this late notice that will compound in the next year's savings, I don't understand why we haven't discussed it, I guess. I'm just kind of a little puzzled, that's all.
Well, Ben, have you, what do you hear as far as the charter reform movement?
Everything has been very quiet since the governor did his presentation. I have not seen or heard anything.
And again, I can't disclose the details of that report, Mr. Kenley, that I just mentioned. But some of those things that were in the governor's recommendations are the same types of things that are in that report from PSBA.
Well, another problem is, if there is reform, is when is it going to happen?
Yeah. Because PSBA can send all these recommendations into the legislature, but that doesn't mean anything's going to change that will help us.
Mr. Brungard, I would say if you're looking for my opinion, I would key on your comment that budgeted overage could be taken out of fund balance at this time. Well, especially because I know that the board's intent is to not raise taxes. We can handle that for 21, 22. We just have to be mindful of making sure that we're continuing to cut expenses going into 22, 23.
And that's kind of where I was thinking that maybe this board was going with exactly what you said. But like I say, anything that we could cut this year and save would compound in the next year's savings. And I hope the new board comes in with some savings or cuts for the next school year. We'll see what happens.
I'm hoping a lot of these children come back when we get the new JSASD facilitator up and running, bring a lot of these kids back. It will save us quite a bit of money.
And I think a lot of those are going to come back just by virtue of the fact that if we can go without wearing masks at the elementary level.
I think so too. So I think we need to sit tight for a little bit.
Dr. Ulmer, what ETA on the JSASD position being able to start recruiting students back?
Well, that person will start on May 3rd, and we are going to spend the rest of the year getting her up to speed, and then throughout the summer doing recruitment just like we did last summer into JSASD. So that'll be part of the effort through the rest of this year and into the summer and as school begins.
There's no other question. That ends my report.
Thanks, Ben, and hope you get well soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enders.
I'm going to switch right over to Jim Keller from Nutrition Inc. so he can update us on the food service budget. I had it under Mr. Enders, but Jim Keller is here with us this evening.
Good evening, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
You can.
Dr. Ulmer, are you okay if I share my screens?
I made you a presenter. Take it away.
Thank you, sir. 1 second here.
We see it.
Okay.
You just might have to make it a little bigger. Oh,
Can you see it? Still see it?
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Okay. So folks, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Just as I know Mr. Enders was feeling the stress, this is kind of a hard budget year. No crystal ball, don't really know what next year is going to look like. But what I'll do is I'll go through the POC pages and point out as I go through, kind of where and how the numbers developed. Right off the bat, days of service, you'll see it's decreased to 170. You know, this was specified by the district, and I'm assuming that's to account for any potential FIDs that are going to get used next year. This current budget that we're in, it was budgeted for 176. So moving down, this would be the paid portion of the POC pages of the budget. And good news is the USDA extended the SSO waiver moving into the entire school year next year. Originally, it was just up to the first day. Now they have extended it. So ultimately what that means is free for the kids and additional reimbursements will come in for the district. So that's why there's no meal counts on this first page. Coming down here, I do want to discuss a la carte. What I used currently projected, or current a la carte right now, guys, is about $304 a day. That includes adult and student a la carte. To kind of put that into perspective, pre-COVID, it was $900 a day. So a huge gap. I'm not sure we're seeing this district on district of a la carte decrease. I believe maybe it's students don't want to wait in line, as well as parents aren't sending money in. Since the meals are free, they're not sending that extra money in. What I did for this budget, I challenged where we're at now by $200. So there's $500 a day in for this budget. So moving on to page 2, this is the federal reimbursement. So you'll see a total for the year would be 77,860 breakfasts, and that's current participation. And that's actually really well. As Mr. Enders mentioned with participation, you know, at the time of budget creation, I was looking at 1,976 students sitting in the buildings at any given day. So pre-COVID, we were doing about 468 breakfasts per day. And again, that's against, you know, enrollment, which was over 2,000. So right now in the budget's 458 a day. So they're actually doing well compared to enrollment compared to previous budgets. So I let that as is. Now lunch, on the other hand, that's another story. Pre-COVID, we were doing about 1,321 lunches a day. Currently, when I took average daily participation from August 1st up to March 31st, we're only doing about 868 a day. In lieu of not keeping that lower number in there, what I did was I took a pre-COVID percentage. So pre-COVID, we were doing 59% lunches compared to enrollment, and I applied that 59% to the 1976 kids that are in the buildings on any given day. So that came to 1,150 lunches approximately per day. This lunch performance, any school that participates in the national school lunch programs goes through ARs, they get an extra 7 cents. So that was worth just about $14,000 for the district. This is the state reimbursement. You get 10 cents per breakfast and 10 cents per lunch. Additional, if you're above 20% for breakfast, additional resources for lunch as well. This other catering, this $13,075, generally what I do is I add about 1.5% on reimbursements, because what happens is the state comes out with the reimbursement rates well after they require these budgets to be sent into the state, and generally we see about a 1.5% increase. So that's where that number came from, added about 13 grand to the bottom line. This 3086 contracts represent any meals that Jersey Shore produces and then ultimately sells to another organization that they claim. So Head Starts, pre-K, things like that. So coming down, you'll see total revenue for the school is $1,036,961. Okay, moving into the next page, this a la carte meal equivalents, this is a state equation. Ultimately, it's just looking at how many dollars in a la carte equals one meal. It doesn't do anything to the bottom line. We just have to have it in there. A lot of schools use it if they do time studies, looking for that meals per man hour. District labor and benefits, this is specified. Mr. Enders gives me these totals to put in each year, so I just put them in as specified. So moving into page 5, these are all the costs. They call them FSMC costs. And we are not permitted to add any line item costs in here within the 5-year contracts. And we're still within the 5-year contract. So any cost that's in here now was the same that was in previous years. The CPI this year is 1.4. So no direct FSMC cost can rise above 1.4%. There's 2 big ones on here that I wanted to point out. One is food costs, and food costs is always big. But what I did with this food cost, folks, is I added 6% onto it, just in case food continues to rise. This year, we are seeing some tremendous food costs. Let me see if I can. No, I can't find that right now. And then also, in that same context, this paper costs, $46,818. I budgeted 8% increase in paper costs. Again, if it doesn't happen, great. It's only going to hit the bottom line to the good. One example I could think of with paper costs, gloves went from $18 a case up to $81 a case. Hot dogs, I think, went up 30% just for hot dogs. So it's, you know, it's heartbreaking to see, but I just put those in there just in case prices continue to rise. Let's see. So moving down, again, these are nutrition's fees, administrative and management. Again, they can't rise more than 1.4% over last year's costs. So it comes down to the bottom line of a minus 160,233.62. And this last page just represents that same dollar figure. So I know that was a lot of info, and I probably talked pretty quick. Any questions that I could walk through right now? If not, or you can think of one, you know, by all means, get a hold of me, you know, at any time. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going back to the beginning of my agenda and recognizing Luann Gasparin for the Jersey Shore Education Foundation.
There we go. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. Good. Good evening. And I don't know if this is going to be good news or bad news, but I would just like to give you a little bit of an update from the foundation. As you know, we receive EITC funds from local businesses, which must spend we must spend their monies on pre-approved programs and projects. These pre-approvals have to come from DCED, Department of Community and Economic Development in Harrisburg. As a review on the process for applying for any teacher mini grants or foundation grants, it is multi-level. Teachers initiate the process by completing an application which outlines a project or a need. Then the project is connected to academic standards, what grade levels would be impacted, and agreed to an evaluation at the end of the project, which is due at the end of the year. The principal must then review the application, approve it, and sign it. The application is then forwarded to the superintendent's office, where it is also reviewed, approved, and signed by the superintendent. Then the application is forwarded to the foundation and reviewed by the Teacher Mini Grant Committee for approval. And this committee decides which projects or needs are valuable and which will be funded. The committee consists of retired teachers who at least have a background in the classroom. So between conversations with the principals and Dr. Ulmer, we have produced additional proposals for various schools. The one that I have submitted for approval, which I have not heard back from yet, is to fund an internship in the district. And this student intern would be hired by the district the foundation will reimburse the costs of that particular intern to the district. The job description for that intern would be developed as a capstone project in any one of the CTE programs and supervised by Dolly Oden, who is our person who supervises the CTE program kids that are out on capstones. The wages, the number of hours, and the rest of the details would be worked out with all of the above individuals, meaning Mrs. Oden, the principals, the superintendent, and someone from the foundation. Myself and Shelley Moore will work with the supervisors and Mrs. Oden to make sure all requirements have been met. We are currently considering an accounting intern to be supervised by Mr. Enders to develop the details of the job description as a trial internship. When I was in contact with the business department, there will not be a completer senior this year, so this proposal will be moved to next year pending approval from Harrisburg. In talking with Keith Veldhuis from the middle school, there is a curriculum redesign for the grade 8 pathways curriculum. Mrs. Hartman and Mrs. Reeder and Mr. Keith Veldhuis are in collaboration to define all of the details pending equipment availability. And the foundation has been approached to assist in purchasing equipment for the middle school curriculum redesign in these classes. So those are the teacher mini grants. They have a definite submission date and they're only offered once a year. A few years ago, we approved what we call anytime grants. And these funds are designed to take advantage of time-sensitive opportunities that may come up throughout the course of the year. It is outside of the regular teacher mini grant cycle. For instance, later on, I think it's this month and next month, Mr. Jeff Clue was contacted a historical traveling exhibit, and we funded that to bring it to the district in connection with the Jersey Shore Historical Society. So these grants, the anytime grants, also must be approved by the principal and the superintendent before being submitted to the foundation. Differences are the amount is smaller. The grant must be voted on by the entire foundation board, and these are rolling submission proposals, since they may be requested throughout the course of the entire year. To date, we have received anytime grants from Jeff Clue for the traveling history exhibit, one from Diane Mantek to update the butterfly garden at JSE. Additional grants are expected from Bethany Hartman for the 8th grade curriculum design equipment, and this is Heather Reeder for materials for simulations, pulse oximeters, stethoscopes, 3D the heart model, and things like that. What they have proposed is to have a traveling series of stations that the kids will rotate through. All of them would be, most of them, shall we say, would be in connection with the CTE programs we have at the high school and giving the kids, the middle school students, an opportunity to just dip their toes in the waters for those various curriculums. I also have talked with Dr. Ulmer about different pieces of equipment for the middle school, and one of them between Heather Reeder and Brett Wieland is she gave it to me today, a grant for some 3D printers and some Vex robotics kits. The other one that we're expecting, and I do not have that one yet, is Mrs. Ongst, Mary Ongst, is taking over the community garden at the middle school, and she's looking at getting materials to plant it, put soil in it and plant it so anyone within the community can come and pick. She also asked about laying out and maybe expanding the garden, and I'm just letting you know we have not penned it. We have not had any approvals on that. We have not contacted maintenance. We have not moved on that whatsoever. But I'm just letting you know that that may be a possibility. Anyway, those are a few of the projects we've worked on throughout this difficult year, and it has been a very interesting one, I might say. We do have excess EITC funds that we must spend or we will not receive any more. So that's, I think, the rest of the push for some of those other technology equipment things is driving some of that need to expand some of the monies that we spend. So we are open to any opportunities to work with the district in anything that you may have as a suggestion. Please do not hesitate to contact me or Dr. Ulmer or Mr. Allen, because Mr. Allen is your representative on the foundation board. You may pass on any ideas to any board member of the foundation also if you have something that you would like to see. Unfortunately, we cannot make up your deficit in the budget, but hopefully something will attempt to come down, boost your income just a little bit. So if you have any questions, please ask. I'll do my best to update.
Mrs. Gasparin, how much needs to be spent?
Right now, and Mr. Enders and I need to sit down and get to the penny, but right now I'm estimating between $5,000 and $7,000. So,
and if we don't spend it, then we lose it and we can't use it any further. Like what's the consequence there?
Okay, the consequences are when you receive EITC funding, you are required to spend 20% of what you receive in any year. This year we received $41,500. So that's about $8,500 roughly. My mental math is not all that sharp, I will admit. Plus we had $10,313 left over from last year. So we have to spend a minimum of 18.3, 18.7, something like that this year. We have already spent approximately, I'm going to say, what, 13 maybe? There's a couple that just never materialized, like the Jeff Clue's field trip down to the Bollesburg Museum. That was about $1,300 to $1,500. There was one other one right now. I can't remember what it is. So if we don't spend all of our monies, then we are not allowed to receive additional monies the following year. And we may have to wait a whole year before we're eligible to receive funds again. So in other words, right now I'm kind of racing to get some of these monies spent, and it has to be spent by June 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year. Did that help you out, Dave?
Yep. And it has to be spent in coordination with like you said, the local workforce investment board or.
Well, it has to be spent within the confines of the approved programs that we have on the books.
Gotcha.
And I can send you a list of all of our approved programs if you like.
And what would be the turnaround time on obtaining those funds? If somebody was going to submit, say, next week?
Well, like I said, I got 2 today, and I will be sending those out to all of our foundation board members with a little explanation. And the one is for 3D printers and the VEX robotics. VEX robotics, I believe, have already been approved, as well as 3D printers. I have a question into Harrisburg simply because the 3D printers is not an issue about purchasing with EITC funds. What I was trying to do was to update a couple computers so that if we bought 4 3D printers, I would like to have 4 computers to connect to the 3D printers, just to kind of help update, a little bit of the technology in those areas. We have a site license, I believe, for Autodesk, so that's not a cost. And when I talked with Brent Whelan, he suggested what 3D printers to use because that's what he uses in his labs. Therefore, we're kind of keeping it identical across the different courses. The only other thing is the filaments that they use, but he seems to think that could be purchased in the disposable or consumables items of the regular department budget. They're not really that expensive. He said they were about $29 for 2 pounds or something like that of it, so minor cost.
Mrs. Gasparini.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand. The remaining money has to be spent for technology?
No, we cannot purchase technology. We cannot purchase computers. That's a given. What we have to spend it on, and the way they define projects and programs is how is it that the kids are going to benefit and what will the kids do? They want to see hands-on projects being made by the kids. There was a caveat, and it's kind of amorphous, I guess, is the word I'm trying to come up with, because you are permitted to buy computers if what you're purchasing is going to require the use of them. And that's the caveat that I'm trying to define here with the computers for the 3D printers. We have 3D printers. Some of them are old, some of them are cheap, and they just simply don't work.
So if one of our was short on lumber, something like that could be applied?
I'm sorry, that you faded out. Ask again, please.
If one of our CTE programs was short on lumber, that would be something that we could apply for?
Good question. I do not believe, I'd have to ask about that, to be quite frank with you. I don't know. I don't know if those supplies would be, because I know the cost of lumber at this point is exorbitant. And that's under consumables. So I'm not sure. I can find out. I will find out.
Thank you.
Yep.
I will circle back to Mrs. Gasparini's Mr. Becker's initial question and say that Mrs. Gasparini and I are working to make sure we spend the money on approved programs so that we don't want to jeopardize continued funding. So we're spending the money.
One way or another. We were very lucky. Muncie Bank has been a generous contributor, as well as Woodlands Bank. And we had representatives from those banks tour some of the EITC projects that we had last week. And I must say that the members were duly impressed with what they saw and how their money was being spent. And they were very positive about the different projects and all of the other things that they saw, such as the steam room at JSC and the gardens, and the excavator and the watershed table, all those kinds of things. And I did give them a list of all of our approved current EITC projects, approved ones, I should say. And like I said, I can send those out if you would like to have a copy of them. I can send them either to Craig or to Dr. Almer, and they can forward it.
Mrs. Gasparini, I have a question.
Yeah.
You brought this up. You brought the old excavator nemesis up to me again, but you had talked before about getting a simulator seat or of some type for the kids to actually sit on, and I don't know what it would do, but do you have enough money for that? I'm not going to fight you on this anymore, but.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Just say thank you.
Come in and try it, Mr. Brungard.
Pardon me?
You should come in and try it.
I heard some good things about it from a sub that you have, and that in the district. I see him quite often. He has some good comments about it. So, but do you have enough money for the actual seat or whatever it was called?
Well,
You said
it's
second
yeah,
part?
it's the base of that simulator, and no, we don't. To be honest with you, I haven't checked into the cost of that base. I know you can purchase it, and I know that you can add it on, so to speak. And what it does is it sits underneath the seat component at this point in time. So while operating the simulator, if the kids bump the dump truck that they're loading, they feel it. You know, they get bumped, and it really makes a definite, realistic sensation, I guess, for the kids. But the kids have to have, whenever they get on it, they work on it, they have a checklist that they have to meet. And if they don't have a checklist for that particular station, they're not allowed to move on to the next step. And that even includes the speed at which they work. I was in there one day and saw a child who did a rather good job, I thought, with it. He wasn't bumping the dump truck. He didn't break the pipeline. I mean, you know, the things that would be important to me, but he was slow, and the program failed him on that. So not only does it look at the skills that the kids have, it's also looking at the speed at which they work, and it gives them a very detailed report as to what they did well and what they didn't do well. I believe I'm not coordinated enough to try that. I'd probably break the thing myself, but.
Yeah, I was speaking to somebody and they said that the speed of their work calculates into fuel utilization by the equipment. So if they're using too much fuel, it comes back and it's a black mark against their performance.
Yep. It's pretty cool. I was asked if there are other components for that thing, and there are. I know that. I know one of them would be like a forklift operator, and I think some of the controls are very similar, so it's just a matter of a keyboard and maybe a couple of controls. They're not that expensive. That's a possibility. Mr. Rager hasn't said much of anything, so we're just kind of holding the line, I guess, at this point in time. But if they want to go through something like that, then it's something that we could probably save for. I would question where we'd put it, because it is a rather, it's a big space. You have to have, what is that, a 10 by 12 room, I think, that we have it in, that's climate controlled so that it doesn't affect the equipment. But it is pretty neat.
So I have one question.
Go for it, Mrs. Stemler.
It's a question or more just a thought I had, that I know you said you had to spend the money, but at the same time, you also said that you have the internship that I'm assuming that you're funding for the accounting. What I guess my thought is there any way of, in essence, when I say hanging on to that money, because technically you're not spending it, but actually forming much more of a broader internship program in many different areas, where as you find the students and build it, then you can obviously spend it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's just the minimum amount that we have to spend. So that's not including the residual funds left over from this year, which is probably going to be about $10,000-$12,000 that we can put into next year's budget, and hopefully COVID won't be around and we'll get a little bit more areas to spend. Have we talked about different internships in different departments? And the answer to that is yes. And I think Dr. Ulmer, you can probably bring them up to date on that. We did talk about a number of different areas, and Dolly Oden has also mentioned a few different areas too. So one or the other. I mean, the question is what kind of, I don't want to say what kind of problems might we encounter with some of the areas. But yeah, we have talked about different areas and expanding that to different places. Yes. And we still have money left over we have to spend next year. So.
And I think, Mrs. Stemler, what you heard Mrs. Gasparin say is, since this is new to us, we wanted to start somewhere and have a model in place that we know works, and then we can expand to other programs. I think she's frozen. We can follow up with her. Additional questions for Mrs. Gasparin? Okay.
Nope.
Thank you for your time, Mrs. Gasparin, and your work with the foundation.
Thank you, and I will send you that list of approved projects, and I will look into the funding, maybe the cost of lumber, or some of the other supplies that we may need for some other programs. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, under my report this evening, for I put on the agenda a copy of what is titled the 21st Century Classroom Memorandum of Understanding. This is, and we talked a little bit about our JSASD costs. This would be your approval of this at the next meeting would allow us to enter into this MOU with the association. We did say we purposely left this separate from the contract because this is a one-year trial, but the idea is that we would begin in the high school with teachers who have courses fully online at this point. We would use our own courses and our own teachers for students in the high school in JSASD, so you would not be going outside the district and paying for those courses. This MOU puts in place that situation. This has been discussed through contract negotiations, but we did leave this separate on purpose so that we can adjust it on its own and reapprove just that and not have it part of the contract. So now that the contract has been approved, that's why I'm bringing this forward. Also on my update for tonight, I have additional policies. We did discuss the equity and excellence in education policy in executive session. We will make some edits to that and not put it on the board agenda next time for a first read. The other three on the agenda are language edits from changes in the law from PSBA. And that is my entire report for this evening, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions or anything else for the superintendent's report? Okay, we'll move on to public comment, courtesy of the floor. And as we have been doing since we went virtual, the first courtesy of the floor will be open to any topic of interest for the public, and we'll bypass the courtesy of the floor at the end of the agenda.
I do want to point out, if you're looking at the website, the phone number you'll see for tonight is different than you've seen in the past. It's also going to be on the live stream. The phone number for courtesy of the floor is 570-880-0670. The reason for that is we have an upgrade of Teams, and those people that call that number will be able to be admitted right into this Teams session so that we will have no sound issues, and I will be able to let them right into the waiting room. Please make sure if you call courtesy of the floor that you don't be watching the live stream, or we will get feedback. You will see on the live stream there is that number is posted. Again, it's 570-880-0670. And there is an ID number. Once you call in, that is 967-885-364. But it is also on the live stream. Both of those things are out there that you can use. Call in the courtesy of the floor. It's 821. Again, the phone number is 570-880-0670. Remember, it's different than previous meetings. ID number is 967-885-364, and that will be posted on the live stream as well. The live stream, remember, is lagged, so if you're watching, you will see that in a minute.
Did we test this to make sure that if there was somebody who didn't have a computer and just wanted to call them using a regular phone?
Make a motion that we close courtesy of the floor. Mary?
I'll second that. Patrice?
You're muted, Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Any discussion before we have a roll call on it?
I'll just say that, yes, we did test that earlier today and the number was on the website as well, so it worked.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to close courtesy of the floor. Can we have a roll call, please?
Who was the second, first of all? I got Mary.
Patrice.
Patrice?
Okay. Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler?
Yes.
Mrs. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Kinley?
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, we'll move on to personnel agenda. We have items A through L. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mary.
Thank you. Second? Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion, concerns, or questions on A through L? Hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler?
Yes.
Mrs. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Kinley?
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, moving on to curriculum instruction. We have only one item A, and that's approval of the high school financial algebra textbook that was available for review since the last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Mary.
Second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments on the textbook approval?
Dr. Ulmer, can you please remind me how much the total cost of the book is?
I knew somebody was gonna ask me that.
Just so I know what I'm voting.
I had it for the last meeting. I gotta go back and look at that meeting folder. I believe they were, I don't want to say and be wrong, but I believe they were a little over $100 a book. I don't have it with me. Give me, if you want to come back to that, I can go over to my office and grab that book. It's in the book.
It's not necessary. I can look
Okay.
it up. I just didn't know if it was readily available. Thank you.
I left it in the book for people that were reviewing the book to see the quote. It's a little over $100 a book. It's one class. It's business math in the high school.
And do you remember how many books we'd be purchasing? Again, just the estimate.
Yeah, I think it was in like the 20 range. You know, it's one class in the high school.
Thank you. We have a motion and second. Do we have any other questions?
I guess I do. My network just went down. I don't know where we're at.
The financial algebra textbook.
Okay, we haven't reached finance yet, H?
Nope.
Okay. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
And what you missed with the cost of the book, to Dr. Ulmer's recollection, is about $100.
He's back. He can give you the
And there'll be
price.
20.
He's gonna tell you here in a minute. He's opening it up.
Got it in my folder. It is 100.
You're muted.
You accidentally muted yourself.
It's $120 a book, and we do need 50 of them, so we must have 2 sections of that class. So it comes to $6,627.50.
And it's in this year's budget, right?
It is in this year's budget. It also includes an online version. So if we are remote, those kids can access that textbook remotely from anywhere.
Any other questions? Now we'll go to a roll call, please.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler?
Yes.
Mrs. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Kinley?
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, building and grounds, nothing under building and grounds. I would like to comment that I've heard, continue to hear good feedback on the condition of the softball field. And also the work that our building and grounds team has done on the soccer field to get that replanted and ready for play. So thank you for that group. Finance items A through I.
So moved, Mary.
Second.
Any questions, concerns on finance A through I?
Do we need to pull out letter?
That's not in that section.
Okay, sorry.
If that's where you were going, I'm sorry. Hey, hearing no questions on finance, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler?
Yes.
Mrs. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Kinley?
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, moving on to miscellaneous. We have items A through E. We will be voting on C separately, using the methodology that each member will designate their choice of the 2 vendors who had bid on the investment proposal. So could I have a motion to approve A through E, and then we'll separate C out when we vote?
So moved, Mary.
Second, Wayne.
Okay.
Mr. Allen, is it too late to ask for B to be pulled for an individual vote?
No, that would be fine.
I thought you said
missed
B.
that. Which one did you ask for separate, Mr. Brungard?
The RSO, item B.
Okay.
So the motion still applies to A through E. but we'll be voting on B and C separately. So could we have any discussion on items A, D, or E?
A, B, or E? I have a question.
A, D, D, or E?
Okay. D as in dog.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, hearing none, could we have a roll call on A, D, and E under miscellaneous?
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, now we'll have any questions or concerns on item B?
I have a question. The pay scale on page 5, the MOU. I'm going to take the first year, 21-22, 311, basically daily. Is that reimbursed? Is that what that person would actually make through the Tyne Valley Police, or is that the rate that we are paying him somehow that we have come up with?
It's basically a contracted service. So that's what we pay to the police department. And that covers all of, not just the salary, but all of their other miscellaneous expenses for that position.
And how did we arrive at that rate, may I ask?
They arrived at it.
They did.
We wouldn't have any information that would permit us to calculate that.
That's kind of what I thought. In other words, it's based on what they're paying him and the expenses and stuff after that.
Correct.
And they also come up with a 2% increase per year. How was that arrived at?
Same.
Right?
And again, you don't know how much of that 2% actually is paid to the officer and how much is increase of costs for their supplies, just like everybody else's supplies have gone up for our household items or a 2x4.
So this was solely set forth through the police department.
Correct.
Okay.
But
If I was
basically,
incorrect on any of that, feel free to correct me, Dr. Elmer.
basically what was based on what we've done in the past, right? We've had this contract before.
Yes, it's a renewal, just at a new rate.
Yep, it's a renewal of the current contract.
Wasn't this, Mr. Allen, am I correct in saying that in the past, some of this was paid for by a grant previously?
It was, I can answer that. It was, and it still can be that way. It's just the way that that they've redone the grant over the last 2 years regarding COVID and what they want this kind of money to go to. But in the past, we've always had a set amount, and half of this amount was always paid for by the PCCD grant, safety grant.
And I just remind them, you can terminate this anytime for any reason with 180 days notice. So it's not like, so if they're concerned with the length of the contract.
Mr. Kenyon's also reminding that you're able to terminate this at any time with 180-day notice. So if anyone's concerned with the length of the contract, that we just have to give that notice for it to be terminated. And in regards to the amount, Mr. Allen, what you said is very accurate. And Mrs. Thomas, it was an amount that was agreed upon through the last contract, and then the police commission met with Chief Dreamer, and Chief Dreamer basically, in discussions with us and with the police commission, is what came up with that 2%. What they felt they could live with and still pay the salary and the costs they have, and still be able to offer us a full-time SRO.
So what you're saying is we could, within 180 days, whatever the time frame was, we could discuss this at a later time and see if there's any other options that we would want to pursue, possibly.
You could.
Okay.
But Dr. Dady, so I just want to be very clear. So this is still actually technically
I think she froze. This is the what?
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. So my connection at times isn't always good. So technically speaking, this is still funded, or at least half of it is still funded, correct, by a grant, even though it's not written like that technically for us to see.
Well, for the last 2 years, what we've done is you've basically paid for the SRO the past 2 years kind of out of our budget, and we've put other things we would have paid for in that grant. Once the COVID requirements of what we can spend that on, once the grant hopefully goes back to the way it was, then yes, the plan is the set amount. We get a set amount every year that pays for about half of that SRO salary.
Okay, that's what I remembered, and I just wanted to make it. My memory doesn't always remember things like I do. So I was pretty sure that's how that worked in the past, and it's just that in the memorandum, it doesn't like come out to specifically state it like that. That's why I just wanted to make sure that we were still receiving a grant with that half of it's paid for. So, okay, that's good enough.
Mrs. Stemler, that's because this is our MOU with the police. So we're obligating ourselves to pay. If we get grant money to cover that cost or half of that cost, or whatever it is, that it doesn't really bear on the actual MOU.
Okay, thank you.
I would even add that if another grant would come along that would pay for the other half, that'd be great. We'd take advantage of that too, and then that would be awesome.
Any other questions on B? Okay, hearing none, could we have a roll call on B, please?
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Brungard?
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler?
Yes.
Mrs. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Kinley?
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, we'll move on to C then. And what we'll ask is every member as they vote, just designate which of the two bidders you prefer. Just for the record, for the audience who may be listening, the cost for each of the bidders was relatively equal. The net cost of managing this account. So there really isn't any great financial benefit one way or the other. Is that still correct, Dr. Ulmer?
Correct.
Thank you. So that's covered by the first motion. Do we have any questions, remaining questions on item C?
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
I apologize, I missed this somewhere. Who are the two bidders?
Woodlands Bank and Miller Financial Strategies. Those are your two proposals, Woodlands Bank and Miller Financial Strategies.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, you'll just designate Woodlands or Millers as you vote, please. We'll have a roll call.
Mr. Becker,
Based on their support of our education foundation with EITC funds, I'm voting for Woodlands.
Mr. Brungard,
I'm also voting for Woodlands.
Mrs. Dobler,
I'm voting for Miller.
Mrs. Grant,
Miller, please.
Mr. Kinley,
Woodlands.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Miller's.
Mrs. Stemler,
Woodlands.
Mrs. Thomas,
Miller's.
Mr. Allen.
Woodlands.
So that would be 5 for Woodlands and 4 for Miller's.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments? Obviously, we don't have any action items under old business. If there are any concerns or comments under old business anyone would like to make?
Mr. Allen, I have one.
Thank you.
Dr. Ulmer, this is going to you.